Okay, well, it's story time again. We're sitting next to the fire, kind of huddled up next to it. It's not real cold out, but it is a bit chilly, and the fire makes it better. Let's see, what is it? Early December, December 3rd, I think, and we're moving into the story. This takes place, let's see, I'm about 49, maybe 50 at this point. And all of a sudden I start having heart fibrillations. And so I go to a local cardiologist, and, well, not a local, actually, Sacramento. Which is about 60 miles from here. And, you know, I just showed up, and he checked me out, and he says, well, yeah, you have a slight case of atrial fibrillation, which means that one of my chambers is not firing correctly. It's like taking the timing in a car and just tweaking it up, you know, just 5 degrees. Car still runs, everything's going good, just not quite as efficient as it was. And that certainly was the case. And he said, well, I says, well, what happened? How, you know, I exercise every day, I eat pretty good, the whole thing. And he says, well, it's probably some kind of birth defect. And it didn't show itself until now. I said, well, okay, fine. He says, but you got to start taking this drug. And I'm like, oh, you know, no way, I do not take drugs. And up to that point, aspirin was about as you know, heavy as it got. Well, you know, illegal drugs, yeah, I did a lot of that. But that was in my early years. You know, I hadn't probably taken any illegal drugs for, you know, 10, 15 years at that point. 35, 45, 50, yeah, about 15 years. So I says, well, what if I don't take them? He said, well, this is what's going to happen is you're going to be out in the forest sometime on a hike or something like that, and you're going to go into AFib, and that'll be it. You'll be dead because you won't be able to get to a hospital quick enough. And I'm like, well, okay, I'll take some drugs. What am I taking? Atenolol. He says this thing has been around since the 50s. It's solid. It's inexpensive. It's basically what it's going to do is slow your heart rate down and give your heart a chance to kind of relax a little bit because it's running a little fast. Okay, all right, I'll take the damn drug. So I start taking it, and it just whacks me out. I mean. And, you know, I go back to the cardiologist, and he says, well, give it some time. You know, give it a couple of months. It should your body should kind of adjust to it, and it should be better. And I'm like, well, okay, I'll give it a couple of months. And sure enough, after a couple of months, I started feeling normal again. I mean, normal meant that I actually had some energy to go do something. And so, you know, I start seeing the cardiologist on a regular basis, about every 4 or 5 months. He wants an appointment. He wants to keep an eye on me. And it's, okay, I'll do that. You know, $100 every time you show up at any doctor's office, really. And this was, you know, before I was 50. At 65, Medicare kicked in. And, you know, at 50, I was paying cash for everything. So it was like, you know, not that easy to let go of $100 at that point. So I see him on and off for the next, maybe 5 years. And at that point, he spots the fact that I have hardened arteries. And I'm hardened arteries. You know, I ran for 25 miles. Every day I ran 2 or 3 miles every day. And I ate good, and all of this stuff. And, you know, he said, well, it's just your genetics. Probably your mom or your dad had hardened arteries, and, you know, they may have had a heart attack. And I said, well, yeah, sure enough, my mom and my dad had issues with their arteries. He says, well, you know, it's not critical at this point. We'll just keep an eye on it. I said, okay, fine. So another 4 or 5 years goes by, and it's starting to get a little more critical. And he says, well, I think we should take an angiogram. And I says, okay, well, how much is an angiogram? Oh, it's $20,000. 20 grand? What are you talking about, 20 grand? I don't have 20 grand. And I didn't have insurance. I've never had insurance my whole life. You know, I was an artist most of my life. Basically hand to mouth sort of situation. You know, I says, I can't afford 20 grand. He says, okay, well, here's the alternative. And he was old school. You know, he was probably in his 60s at that point. And he said, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go find a hill and walk up that hill every day. And he said, one of the days, you're not going to be able to walk up that hill. And that's when I want you to give me a call. So for the next 10 years, I walked the loop around Lazy Dog Road, which is the road I live on. It's about a mile walk up and down these fairly steep hills. I got, you know, beefed up. I got strong, and, you know, I could walk up those hills no sweat. And sure enough, one day, wham, I couldn't walk up the hill. And I was like, whoa, what happened? So I gave him a call. He says, well, you better come in. So I go in, and at just about that time, I'm turning 65. And Medicare hasn't quite kicked in yet, but I mean, we're like a week out. Well, it actually wasn't Medicare, because Medicare had already kicked in, but it was the supplemental. And that hadn't quite kicked in yet. We were about a week or so out. And so I go in to see him, and he kind of gives me a preliminary check, and he says, well, you know, you've probably got a couple of arteries, you know, little small arteries in your heart that are plugged up. And they probably need a stent, which means we need to do the angiogram. And I said, well, you know, I can't afford an angiogram. So he says, well, go home. I don't want you to walk for a while. Just relax. Don't overdo yourself, and wait for that supplemental to kick in. So I did. So it was about a week or so. Came back once the insurance had kicked in, and went in and got an angiogram. And he says, and you know, I was like totally against everything that AMA has to offer to that point. And he says, well, just go in there. And I says, well, what, you know, if they go in, they check me out. He said, well, if they find something, they're going to probably put a stent in. And I'm saying, well, don't I have a choice in the matter? He said, well, the fact is if you're going to have a choice in the matter, the surgeon's not going to go in. I was like, really? So no choice. Oh, but okay, let's do it. Because, you know, I have been kind of slowing down over the last 2 or 3 years. And I thought I was just kind of getting older, you know, which of course I am. But, you know, he says, no, your heart's having trouble. Okay, fine. Let's go in. Angiogram. So I go into the hospital, and, you know, they do the whole thing, and they put me on the operating table, and then they put me out, and next thing I wake up and I'm, you know, looking at the doctor and looking at my wife, and And the doc says, well, you know, we went in and we wanted to put a stent in, but one of your arteries, and it's like, you know, it's not a artery the size of my finger. It's a little pencil thin artery that wraps around my heart and feeds part of my heart. He says, that's plugged. And we can't put a stent in it because it's 100% plugged. He says, but the interesting thing is that over the last 3 or 4 years, it's been plugged at least that long, that your body has created another little artery around the blockage. And he shows me on the, you know, on the CAT scan or whatever it was that he did. And sure enough, there's this little artery that just keeps feeding that part of my heart, but you know, not as much as it should. He says, we're going to have to go in and do a bypass. A bypass? Wait, back up a couple steps. You know, a bypass? What does that mean? He said, well, you know, we kind of got to go in and open up your chest and go in and work on your heart directly. Yikes! I'm freaking out, you know. He says, well, you know, I got appointments, I can't do it till next week. And I'm like thinking, well, okay, I get at least a week reprieve before, you know, I go under the knife. And so he says, you can stay in the hospital or you can go home. He says, but if you go home, I want you to do absolutely nothing. Just be a total couch potato. I said, well, I'd rather go home because, you know, I didn't really want to stay in the hospital. It's not that exciting. So I go home and watch movies all week. So, you know, finally the day comes and I'm not kind of nervous. I'm absolutely shaking in my boots because, you know, this is a major surgery. And so we show up at the hospital. You know, I go through all the preliminaries, fill out all the paperwork, go through all the preliminaries. They run a couple of, you know, IVs into me. And hang on, I need to, hang on. So not having dealt with AMA hardly at all for the prior 50 years of my life, I was more than a little nervous. And so we go in, they do all of this stuff, and get me on the operating table. And, you know, prior to that, I say goodbye to my wife and, you know, hey, I may not see you again. And, you know, she's all freaking out, and me too. But, you know, you just got to relax into it and go with the flow. They throw me on the table. You know, and they got rock music playing in that operating room, and there's 4 or 5 people, and everybody's kind of dancing around, having a good time, and you know, they're interacting with me, and then all of a sudden they put a little thing on my face. That's it. I'm gone. I think it was a 6-hour surgery, double bypass. You know, I wake up in my bed, and I don't know what they gave me, what kind of drugs they gave me, but I'm having hallucinations like you can't believe. I mean, people are walking into the room and I'm talking to them, and you know, having interactions, and then they walk out of the room and somebody else walks into the room. I mean, there's, you know, it's Grand Central Station in my room. And my wife's sitting there, and later she tells me, she said, well, nobody walked into the room. It was just me. And you're talking to all these people. And I'm like, whoa, really? But I'm having a good time. You know, they got me drugged to the, you know, right to the gills. So it was brutal. It was brutal. They split my chest open. They opened me up. They went in and they did all their things to my heart. And and then button me back up. And when I get chest X-rays now, there's this wire that wraps around my chest and pulls my sternum together. And they of course never take it out. And so I'm literally laid out flat for a week. I pretty much can't move, but I forced myself to get up because they said, the sooner you get on your feet and the sooner you start walking, the better you're going to be. So I'm like, oh man, I'm, the gung-ho, I'm ready to go. So, within the first day or two, I'm at least on the edge of my bed and I stand up and I lay back down. And it's a slow progress. And by the end of the week, I'm walking down the hall and walking back. I'm doing this every 3, 4, 5 times a day. And things are getting better. But I'm in just dire pain, and they got me drugged to the gills, and finally after about a week they send me home, and I'm doing better, but I basically at this point just sitting in the chair and watching movies, and it was literally 3 months before I could come back up to this shop, actually. And it was, I think, 6 months or 9 months before I could pick up anything larger or heavier than 5 pounds. And what in here weighs 5 pounds, under 5 pounds? Almost nothing. And so I'd come up to the shop and I'd just kind of walk around a little bit and pick up a wrench and look at it and put it back down. It didn't have a whole lot of energy, but just kind of building myself back up again. After a while I walk out to the end of the driveway and back, and then to the end of the driveway and out on to Lazy Dog for 50 yards or so and back. And every day I just extend my walk. And eventually, within about 4 or 5 months, I'm walking the whole loop. And man, and then I go to cardio rehab, which was a godsend because, I showed up at this place. There's 4 really good-looking middle-aged women. I'm like, whoa, I'm in Nick heaven, because I don't know if at this age. Basically, my experience is I've disappeared. Women call me sir, and they treat me with respect, but not the kind of respect that I got when I was younger. And so I'm pretty much, anyhow. I show up at this place and these women are all over me. They're just like paying total attention to me, making sure that I'm not exercising too hard or that I'm going, they're checking my pulse about every 15 minutes. And oh man, it's great. I got so many women paying attention to me. Oh man, I'm in Nick heaven. So cardio rehab, I start to get really good and strong. And by the time I'm done with cardio rehab, which was like 30-something visits, I'm back to myself again, and I realized that surgery was the best thing that ever happened to me. For one, it put me back on the straight and narrow as far as eating and exercise and all of that stuff, because I'd been a little bit lax in the last 10 years or prior 10 years. And the other thing is I had my energy back. I was back to, feeling strong and young. And that was really good. So, I had a different respect for AMA after that surgery. I still am cautious, but I realize in certain situations, AMA They got their act together. And in this particular situation, man, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And that was about, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago. And I'm doing pretty good. So this is Nick Collier, checking out.